The Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, and this is a special edition of the Numinous Podcast. This is Quest Q&A, your top 10 questions, fears, and concerns addressed by those who have just returned from the wilderness. Everything you ever wanted to know and more about wilderness quests. This is a conversation I hosted online with 4 participants in my recent wilderness quest, and they generously agreed to answer questions that were submitted online to me about questing. But before we launch into that conversation, I want to acknowledge that there are a lot of different types of wilderness quests on offer out there on the interwebs. And so when you hear the term wilderness quest, it's liable to bring up quite a spectrum of different experiences. You know, some people, think of more like a survival weekend that is meant to precipitate some kind of spiritual opening. Like, you know, you go to a place in the wilderness and some guy tells you to step into a 20-foot circle in the woods with no tarp, no tent, no nothing, and just stay in that circle for 4 days. Don't eat. Just, think about what you've done, basically. That is not what I'm doing. Some people kind of think of wilderness quest as like, I've done a 10-day Vipassana retreat. It's kind of like that. It's just that it's outside and with no food and shorter. No, it's not really like that either. Not at all, actually. So before we get into the frequently asked questions, I'd like to take a couple of minutes here to provide an overview of precisely what is happening during this quest that I lead. Why is it 12 days long, for instance? Well, actually, the quest really starts the moment you say yes to it in your heart. And then even before you arrive in the southern Caribou, sort of edge of the Chilcotin there in central BC with me, 2 months prior to that, we have an online call with the group, and we talk about physical logistics. So basically your gear and getting there. And I can give you feedback and, resources, etc. Then 1 month prior to the quest, we have another online call and we talk about spiritual logistics. So specific ways to help you get the most out of your quest. How can you prepare spiritually? Then you arrive at the Circle H Lodge in Jesmond, BC, rural BC, and you'll arrive the night before. We'll have a nice meal all together. In the morning the next day, we host a local First Nations elder from the Shuswap Nation, and he comes and does a territorial acknowledgement, tells us about the history of the land, the ancestry there, his history, and it's an opportunity to receive guidance and advice for your solo time. And then we have our introductions that day, what brings you here, and then we'll talk a little bit about myths as collective dreams and dreams as personal myth. And at the end of the day, I will start to lead you and sort of give you an introduction to trance work. So how you can do shamanic journeying. We actually will do some journey work together. And that's really useful for people who've never actually done anything like that before, or kind of had a bit of training in how to take themselves into altered states of consciousness naturally. On day 2, we start to talk about kind of a theory of human development developed by Stephen Foster and Meredith Little, who are founders of the School of Lost Borders. If you've been looking to find out more about quest work, you've probably stumbled across their work on the internet. And they use the 4 shields or the 4 seasons as sort of a cosmology. We talk about, the different seasons of human development and spend a day diving into that in more detail, how we can get attuned into the rhythm of where we are in our lives. We really locate ourselves. And at the end of the day, the ritual we do together is rock divination. So we're learning how to open to the other, open up a dialogue with other natural beings, and again, practice our trance work and journey work. Day 3, we're focusing on ritual and ceremony, Because there's rituals that everyone will do as you go out on your quest, like crossing the threshold. Fasting is a ritual. And the stone pile ritual, which is, the stone pile is a, in a practical sense, it's a communication system that lets you know that your buddy or the quester closest to you is safe and doing well. But there's a lot of ritual that can go around that because you have to do it every day, and some people include artwork or gifting or mantra, etc. But then we'll also talk about optional rituals that are specific work for the season of life that you're in, that address areas where you might feel stuck. And so we'll talk about rituals so that you can learn to discern which rituals for which times and purposes in your life, things you might do out on your solo time. We'll also address physical plane concerns and training that day. So if you want, we can look over your gear, we can loan you things if you need, but you'll also get training in knot tying and putting up your tarp, fire safety and starting if there's not a fire ban when you're questing, animal and predator safety. We'll teach you how to use your bear spray, that sort of thing. First aid and emergency procedures for the area, and orienting yourself in the landscape. And then the ritual that we'll all practice together will be about calling in our guides and allies and ancestors, and a prayer for safe passage, really, for your questing time. Then, day 4, the pack horses collect us and our gear, and we ride up to base camp. And everyone will go out and find their solo spot. You'll determine who your stone pile buddy is. That night, we'll all be in base camp together, having a fireside meal, and we'll do a fire ceremony together that night. The next day, day 5, there's a sunrise blessing ceremony. You'll leave and go to your solo spot, and you won't return for another 100 hours. You'll come back on day 9. Day 9, the horses will pick us up and all our gear. And when we get back down to the lodge, you'll have an opportunity to rest. And that night we'll do feasting. On day 10, that's when we're going to start witnessing stories. So 2 things are happening there. You're going to practice sharing your story, revealing your gifts and your medicine to your people, but we'll also be learning how to be a good witness, because it's a skill and it takes practice. Day 11, we'll be mirroring, so demonstrating that we heard each other, demonstrating that we can be a good witness. And we'll also be talking about the return, how you can bring something of what you found in the spiritual world and bring it back to the mundane world with you and share your gifts with your people. And then finally on day 12, we have a closing ceremony where we praise and we give thanks and we send our prayers and wishes with our fellow questers back home. So that's the rundown. That's why it takes so long. There's quite a lot of preparation and skill development that happens before and after the actual 4-day solo quest. And again, when you go out to your solo spot, in the way we do it is you will have a tarp and a sleeping bag and water. And, your 10 essentials, first aid gear, all that kind of stuff. But you won't have a tent. You won't be sort of cutting yourself off from the world. The goal is to go as nakedly as possible into the wilderness. But this is not a survival situation. That is not what we're looking for at all. And I've chosen the location specifically because it's well landmarked, it's very safe, there are no grizzlies. Even though there are, other predators, there's nothing unpredictable there, and lots of ways to orient yourself and keep yourself safe on the mountain. So I hope that clarifies all of the details and the other questions you might have about what exactly are people doing out there, why is it 12 days long? But now, without further ado, let's hear from the folks who've just returned. This is the conversation, Quest Q&A, your top 10 frequently asked questions answered. Okay, so I'm here with the 4 stout souls who came with me on my first wilderness quest. I'm here with Jen, Carl Gregor, Patricia, and Ryan, and they have generously offered to answer questions, the most frequently asked questions about wilderness quests. So I have compiled the top 10, and before we launch into those more logistical ones, I want to ask something that might be just kind of in the background of people's minds. How did you know that a quest was a good next step for you on your spiritual path? So I'd like to start with you, Carl Gregor. How did you know that it was the time to take a quest?
I had read a book previously by Bearhart, The Wind is My Mother, and it was the most fascinating book I think I've ever read up until date. And the previous Christmas, I gave it to everybody. Not everybody appreciated the gift, but I really liked the book. And it explains the vision quest quite detailed. Mm-hmm. And I also did feel with myself that I was stuck in my spiritual practice in the way that I didn't really go out with it and explain it to people. I kept it for myself. So for me, it was a situation where I was really stuck in my daily practices. So when this came up, I knew instantly that this is what I want to do. I had all kinds of fears, but I knew that this was the right step to do. So that's why I signed in.
Well, and you were the first person to sign up for Quest. And actually, Jen, you were the last person. You came on quite spontaneously. Somebody else wasn't able to come, and I invited you at the last minute. I remember it took about half an hour for me to get an email response. How did you know a quest was a good next step for you?
Well, because I was feeling pretty lost, and it felt like a pretty appropriate response to the amount of loss I was feeling at the time, I think. So, yeah, I knew because I felt like excited and agitated. In the way that's like makes you feel sweaty and you're not quite sure if it's like good or bad, but it's something, A friend said to me, if you don't go, you're going to regret it for a really long time. So that was a very true statement. And that helped to tip me, I think. But yeah, it was pure confusion. And then just beautiful, it's like beautiful and generous offer from yourself. And how does one say no to that?
Yeah, it's like, hey, we're leaving in a week. Want to come? Yeah, that was pretty great. Thank you.
4 days.
4 days? 4 days. I love somebody who just says yes to spirit. I'm glad you did. Thanks, Jen. Ryan is someone else that I had to quite specifically invite. So I'm curious, Ryan, how did you know if it was the right thing for you?
After that, you invited me to consider the idea. I thought about it a few times over a period of about a few weeks, and each time I did so, I visualized what I believed to be what the opportunity entailed, and each time there was an inspirational, heart-opening feeling where I couldn't deny that it was just going to be a great thing to do, because I've done great things before, and that's what they feel like.
Awesome. That's very cool. I like that you brought up that it's like kind of a somatic kind of thing. Patricia, what was it like for you? How did you know if it was the right next step?
Well, when I heard about it, when I read about it, it was just a yes from the beginning. I didn't really give it a second thought at that time. And also, I mean, thinking back, I've been kind of at a loss in my life for about a year. So I knew it was something that I needed to do. Nature called, and I felt it was something that I could go, somewhere I could go and think and be in touch with nature and listen to spirit, listen to the guidance.
Oh, yeah, that sounds good. I can really relate to that the silence is really compelling, just silencing the world. Okay, thank you everyone for just sort of setting the context there. Okay, so I threw it out there on social media asking people what would be their fears and questions about embarking on a wilderness quest. And I have to say, far and away, the number one fear and concern was around fasting and being hungry. And I think a few people really stated it really succinctly. John said, being hungry could get in the way of my spiritual focus. Amy said, I get hangry when I don't eat. And Brooke said, fasting for that long and thus having an emotional and mental breakdown, which happens when I don't eat lunch. So I'm going to start with Patricia, and then I'm going to ask Ryan, because, well, for you, Patricia, I think that was probably a concern that you also shared. How did you deal with the fasting part?
Honestly, the fasting didn't bother me at all. That was the least, thinking back on the quest, that was the least of my concern. I did not feel hungry until day 3.
Mm-hmm.
And when you said, when you're not surrounded by food, you're not reminded by food, you don't actually feel the effects of fasting. And I find that to be really true.
Mm.
And what I did was I would have an electrolyte tablet in my water every morning. And like you say, if I felt hungry, I would drink water, and that helped to sedate it. For me, anyways, being in the mountains, being in that environment, I was so caught up in it that hunger wasn't really on my mind until day 3.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would concur that using electrolytes is a really great way to trick your body into thinking like, oh, I've just had some diversity of flavor. And so it's almost like distraction or diversity, I think you're looking for. Now for Ryan, you're a person who really takes care of your body. You eat really lean and carefully, and optimizing health is really important to you. So you've probably cleansed and fasted before. I'm curious what it was like for you, since you were doing quite a lot of physical labor with trekking and getting firewood and all of that. How did you handle the fasting?
Well, I think going without food is an extreme measure. It definitely, I did definitely notice that I wasn't eating, and that there was a compounding effect from not eating, and I just felt that it was contributing to where we were all heading in as far as being on a quest was concerned. I couldn't imagine being on a quest and eating.
Mm.
It just seemed like it was the right thing to be doing at that time.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good point. Carl Gregor, did you have any troubles with going without food?
No, I think the first 2 days you're so caught up in what you're going to do, so I didn't really feel it, like Patricia said.
Mm.
I also have a problem to be without food when I'm at home or I'm in a normal environment, because I can go to the closest coffee place or open my fridge. But here, there are no opportunities for food. And it takes away such a frustration and anger, because you really cannot eat. There is nothing with you. So for me, that helped. I didn't really feel bothered about it, because I couldn't do anything about it. If I had something in my whatever backpack, I would have been eating that. There would be real frustration, but there was nothing like that, because there was no food. There's nothing to accept about it. That's the fact, no
You're
food.
very good at accepting the unacceptable, though.
Yeah, makes it easier.
Number 2 for the big fears was actually a tie between fear of the dark and wild animals. So Stephanie said being terrified in the dark, that's her big fear. And then Layla said definitely fear of wild animals and the dark, especially wild animals in the dark. So and also many people wanted to specifically say which animals they're afraid of. Snakes seemed to be the number 1 concern, and then grizzlies and cougars. So the first thing I want to say is there's no snakes where we are, and there's also no grizzlies. So there are black bears, but they're not unpredictable. They're much more docile than grizzlies. So let's just set those aside. There are cougars though. So actually, I'll start with you, Carl Gregor. The dark, I remember, was something that you were pretty concerned about.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. And no, I didn't feel. It's like, I think for me, I had all these things I thought I was going to be afraid of, but when I was there, that didn't happen. I was afraid of being cold, and the freezing temperatures were my thing when I was up there at the mountain. But it's such a peaceful environment, and it's such a calm and friendly. You just get caught up in nature in a way that when you are there, what you're afraid of this disappears. And statistically, for you to run into a bear and for having him to bother you is so slim, so it just will not happen.
That's right.
And that is what I thought about quite a number of times. It just don't happen.
That's right.
If it does, I had the equipment with me to do what I could, and it never worried me.
That's right. So everybody goes out. We provide bear spray, and you are out there with a knife, for instance. But actually, that's absolutely true. The instances of interactions with bears in the wild that result in harm to humans is so very low. Humans are the main predator out there. And you know what I always say? If you die by bear, that's fate. And that's destiny. So you might as well just offer yourself up as some, amazing sacrifice. Though I would fight to the death. But that's absolutely true. It's very rare that that's going to happen. I'm curious, again, Patricia, were you afraid of the dark or wild animals?
I mean, as you guys know, I was afraid of the dark, but it wasn't because of the wild animals. And like you say, when humans move in, the animals kind of move out. And I went everywhere with the bear spray and the knife. But my fear of the dark had nothing to do with the wild animals out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in your experience, you managed the dark by pretty much going to sleep and like not seeing the dark. But then when you came back and we were in the lodge and, you had to walk to and from your cabin, you actually undertook some rituals to help you face the dark. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did. And sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so you were afraid of the dark and you endured the dark. You didn't make it any worse on yourself, but you were able to cope with that fear while you were out in the wild on your solo. Am I right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, yeah. And you say when we went back to the lodge, I did undertake, and I did promise myself that I would go out in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did it after we came back from Quest, I realized that it was where my mind went. It was what I made it out to be bigger than what it actually was.
Mm-hmm.
And the nights where I went out after Quest at the lodge, I mean, I would actually stand there and stare at the sky in the dark and realize that, it's really there's just nothing to fear. It was really all in my head and how my train of thought went.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you felt stronger because you got through those 4 days and that enabled you to face that fear when you got back to the lodge? Like, do you think you would have been able to do that otherwise? Were you able to do that before you went out?
No, I mean, no, because I think one of the thoughts that came to me during the 4 days was, if I can do this for 4 days, being out in nature solo, I can pretty much do anything.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I remember you saying, like, I remember in the 4 days in the beginning of the quest, you would turn in quite early. Like, sun was going down, but you would go to bed before it got dark so that you wouldn't have to walk through the dark to your cabin. Whereas when you came back from your 4 days, you were totally walking out in the dark to go to your cabin.
Yeah, that's right.
It was like a pretty instant transformation.
It is because, I mean, once you've done the 4 days and you fasted for 4 days and nights, I mean, for me anyways, anything else, you kind of look at it and goes, you know what, I can do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Jen, can you say something about cougars? You're experienced with that. So what would you tell somebody who is afraid about wild animals like cougars?
Well, okay. So I would say that probably the best thing to do is, like, if you're experiencing fear, the best thing to do is become a little bit more pragmatic about it and like learn how to behave around a wild animal. Because like Carmen was saying, they are predictable, although it seems unpredictable because you just don't know. They will respond typically in a pretty predictable fashion. I feel like I was really blessed up there. I found cougar tracks and I found bear tracks and quite close to where I was sleeping. But they knew I was there, and that was all that they needed to know. Um, yeah, I would say that the best thing to do is become a little bit more pragmatic about it and to talk about it if you're afraid. Like Carmen and Ruben both have a lot of knowledge and they share it so generously. And they want you to feel safe. They really, really want you to feel safe. So you can just ask them and they will make sure you feel safe.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we, on the day before everybody goes out, we have a whole session on physical logistics. So we went through knot tying, basic first aid, fire building, hatchet and saw safety, and wild animal and predator safety. So we definitely go through all of those things so that people know exactly what to do and how to behave should there be, in an extremely rare instance, an encounter with an animal. The most that happened was seeing tracks. Patricia got really close to a deer. That's pretty magical. Things like that. Okay, so this already came up with you, Carl Gregor. Crystal asks, will I be warm enough? And I'm curious, just psychologically almost. I mean, we all know that with enough gear, you're going to be warm enough, but you actually had gear problems and wound up at your site on solo without the gear you expected. How did you deal with that psychologically?
Well, I at least had a sleeping bag down to 5 below Celsius, -5, and with that you can get pretty far. Maybe there will be times at night, even though you are fully clothed, and that you actually will freeze a bit, but it's not as bad as you think it will be. The main thing is to be dry, and I at least had a tarp that I could cover myself, so if it was raining I wouldn't get wet. So I slept with the clothes fully clothes on, and about 4 or 5 in the morning I took a layer off to have that to put on when I woke up, so I could feel good about myself, and that did it for me. And at times I was a bit cold, yes I was, and the water was frozen when I woke up, but the sleeping bag -5, that helps you. You can pretty much sustain anything in that point. So it was okay. One of those things, when you have achieved it, you feel quite good about yourself.
Very true. I know Patricia was quite vocal about hating the cold. And I totally agree. Like at home, I mean, on just like 10 months of the year, I have like 7 blankets on me when I sleep. When I go on quest, I'm like fully clothed with 3 pairs of pants. I wear like a couch and sweater. I have my sleeping bag. I have a wool blanket outside me. Like, I totally don't like being cold either. Patricia, how did you deal with that psychologically?
I lay it up. I really did. And I listened to you when you said no cotton whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I had 3 layers of merino wool top. I had 1 windproof jacket and a down jacket. And then I had a fleece layer of pants, down pants, and my snow pants.
Nice.
And I prepared myself, and I went with a scarf and a toque and gloves. And honestly, when I was cold, I would walk around a little bit and then I would warm up.
That's right.
So mentally, how I prepared with it was I went really prepared with layers, and I knew, like you say to us, if you're cold, walk around, and that's what I did. So mentally, that's how I prepped for it. And I mean, coming from a tropical country, I really don't like the cold, but you know what? In the end, it wasn't too bad. And I started fire when, I built a fire if I got cold. I would have a fire at 7 in the morning and about 5 p.m. every night, just a small fire just to warm up a little bit.
Yes, all very smart. I really was like, gosh, I hope they remembered the part that if they're, cold at night, they need to move around before they get into their sleeping bags, because their sleeping bag's just going to kind of reflect the heat that they have. It's not going to warm you up. Ryan, did you have any troubles with the cold? How did you handle it?
I also had lots of layers and kept a fire going most of the time. There was 16 hours of daylight during the day, and I went to bed just before dark every night. And it was definitely cold, but I felt really well prepared, and I'm grateful for that.
Good. Yeah, I feel like now is a good time to tell everybody, since like you've all come back, you're all acting as though it really wasn't that big a deal. It was freaking snowing 3 out of the 4 days that you were out there. It was totally extreme. It was absolutely record breaking. In the last 17 years, it has never had precipitation at that time. And every morning at base camp, when I would like open up the tent and see snow, I was like, no, God, no. And then I'd go to do my morning prayers for you guys into the blessing circle, and I prayed for sun. That is what I did the whole time. So, okay. So number 4, biggest fear, Stacy says, I would be afraid of getting lost, or for some reason not being able to get back to base camp and no one knowing where to find me, because, I wouldn't want to quest forever. So, yeah, I'm curious, like, anybody else have any concerns about getting lost, or what you were going to do in that situation? Ryan, were you ever worried about that?
Well, it takes a little bit to get oriented with your area and what it takes to get back to your stone pile, and just to figure out where east and west is and stuff like that. But with the mountains, they provided excellent feature, and it would be really hard to get lost in that area.
Yeah, I agree. Jen, what did you find in terms of navigating and finding your stone pile and all that? Did you find that difficult in that terrain?
No, it wasn't difficult at all. I mean, I think like you said, the snow really helped. You could just follow your own footprints. Super convenient. But no, like, I think even without the snow, it would have been fine. There was one creek and you could hear it. And, the way that it was situated, getting lost, certainly getting disoriented is a real thing. Like, it's easy to get turned around, but it's also really easy to know whether you're going up or down. And that's sort of what the mountains provided, was you would know.
For sure. Patricia, how did you find navigation?
It was difficult for the first 2 days because, I think, as you know, I went into dream state quite fast. But on day 2, when I decided to go for a walk, I pull out the compass and I just know which direction my top was. And I would walk, and then I would know which direction I was walking, and then I would walk back. And like you say, you won't get lost because you know where the creek is. Just follow the creek. And if you just even if you go down to base camp and you hit too far from where base camp is, as long as you follow along the creek, we'll always find you.
Yeah, you'll always find me and Ruben down at base camp, and we could direct you back to where you were. Carl Gregor, what did you find in terms of the landscape? Base camp is in a valley between 2 mountains and a ridge, and there's a creek that goes sort of between the mountains down to base camp and all the way back down to the lodge, actually. Were you ever concerned about getting too turned around, or not being able to, or like wandering off into the mountain range and getting lost?
Yeah, and before I came up to base camp and saw the area, I had that thought in my head. I didn't want to get lost, and I had a fear of that. But when you are there, you realize that it's not possible to get lost. But it's such a clear valley, and we hear the creek, as Patricia and Jen said. So there is no way you can get lost. You can always go back to the lodge. If you don't see the base camp, you will always be able to go back to to a warm, nice place. And it will just not happen. I had some problems to find my stone pile at one point, but it's one of those things, and I did find this was not a big issue. But to really get lost, no, you cannot do that. And I think you said from the beginning that was so true. If you still get lost, you have other big serious problems. Something that
Yeah.
then there's something seriously wrong with you, and you shouldn't be out in a normal day. So
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I had told people that that's specifically why I chose this location, because the natural landscape provides such distinct features, and the creek running all the way down, like right down to base camp and all the way down to the lodge, means that, yeah, you'd have to be a special kind of special to get lost in this particular landscape. Though, without knowing that, without seeing the place first, of course, that's a very healthy, valid concern to have. And using your compass is something we can help you with if you want. We provide everybody with maps of the area. And you've heard people mention the stone pile. That's a communication system. Everybody goes out and there's a buddy, whoever is the closest quester to you, or if it's not another quester, it would be me at base camp. You have a meeting place partway between your two sleeping spots, and that becomes your stone pile. And it's a communication system to make sure that you check in once a day with your buddy. And so, yeah, I was stone pile buddy with Jen and with Ryan. And there were times where there was one time when I needed to find Carl, Gregor, and Patricia's stone pile. I had verbal directions, pretty specific, like how many steps, how many paces, place a cairn if I have to turn anywhere. We made cairns, Ryan and I, between the stone pile and the path, so I could find them again. And so one morning on the last day, when I did go out to just check on people and find their stone piles, I had to track through the dirt to see if I could find footsteps. And of course I did, because it's such a, relatively untouched area. Nobody else is walking around there. There aren't a bunch of trails. And so, a person does start to just read the landscape. And that's a very empowering thing too. When you start to recognize what looks like a human imprint and what doesn't. And that's another thing people could do, is just track their own footsteps back. Now, right in the middle of the pack of all the fears and concerns were a bunch of people with a bunch of different ways of describing various forms of like being bored and self-sabotage. So Cherise said, my fear would be being bored, missing my family, wondering what the hell am I doing this for? And so I'm pretty sure Patricia was annoyed with me, at least at some point during the quest, or was getting bored or wondering what the hell am I doing here? Patricia, how did you handle those kinds of self-sabotaging thoughts while you were out there?
I don't think I was annoyed at you. I was more annoyed that it was snowing.
Okay.
You know what? I quickly realized that I was there for a reason, and there are things I can do, and the rituals that you taught us. So I would pick one ritual to do a day, and then I would meditate. And I also journaled. So I brought my journal up and I journaled my thoughts. And day 4 was a long day because it snowed that day. So I found that day to be the most challenging in a sense, because I couldn't walk around. It was snowing. I didn't want to get wet. And what I did was I did a lot of journaling. And I caught up on a lot of naps.
Yes. That is an excellent coping mechanism. I enjoyed that one. Jen, what did you find when you started to get kind of cranky out there? How did you manage that?
Probably all the things. Like I, had temper tantrums and tried to sit nicely. Like I recall one experience where I came back and yelled at you because my boots were wet. Like I wasn't, I think I did all the things. Yeah, the boredom is real. And like, I had lots of thoughts that were like, I wish I'd brought a book or something like this, but I don't know. I think
books are not allowed. I just have to interject. Books are not allowed. That's no go.
Exactly. And it's a good thing that they're not allowed, because they would be great at distraction. I had lots of magical times too. But I don't know. It's like, I kind of look at it like I'm a grown person, and if I feel bored, then that's my own fault. Like, I used to have a friend who would say, if you feel bored, it's because you're boring. And
Yeah.
it was quite precise.
There's lots of
And
stuff to do
was
out
true,
there.
because I was being bored.
Totally. There's lots of stuff to do.
There's lots.
And there's a lot of different ways that, people will try to distract themselves. Most of the seasons will not be snowing, for instance, so people won't have the opportunity to have fires in summer quests because there'll be a fire ban. And I'm really happy about that, because fire is the television of quest. It's just a distraction. It's something you feed to distract yourself, unless you're in a survival situation, which all 4 of these questers were. So we very much encourage that. Now, getting a little more serious, a couple of people had serious concerns about having a trauma response out there. So actually, both of these quotes are from people named Megan. So Megan says, as a trauma survivor who was neglected, including not being fed, I struggle with the idea of fasting. But also, I think it would be a powerful thing to go through that and survive. And another Megan says, as a person with PTSD and anxiety, I wonder if the 4-day solo fast would bring up some abandonment fears. So, yeah, I'd like to ask Jen and Ryan about this. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's totally legitimate. Trauma is a thing that comes whether you want it to or not. And I guess I would suggest, if this is a question that you're asking yourself, then likely you've done work around self-care and how to manage that when on your own, because it sounds like likely you were. And so I wouldn't doubt the coping skills that you already have. I would also say that it's very real. And if at any time you want to go back, you can. Like, there's no rules that say you have to be alone. You can go closer, you can ask for help, and all of those things are okay. It's not a punishment, it's a real gift that you give to yourself.
Yeah, and when we began this quest, we start with the territorial acknowledgement with a local First Nations elder, and Norman Retaskett, wonderful man from the Shuswap Nation, came, and he kept saying again and again, there's no shame if you guys come back in. I don't think he thought you guys could do it. And he did call afterwards asking after your welfare. He said he was watching the weather every day, and he said what an amazing group of humans that you managed to stay out there the whole time. But many of us have had trauma responses out there, and the thing that I personally do is I rely on ritual. I find ritual is a way for me to embody a kind of focus and a calmness, and it seems to precipitate some kind of reconnection with spirit that when I'm experiencing a trauma response, I feel very much afraid and disconnected and dissociated. And so, you would learn many, many rituals that you might consider undertaking if you were having that kind of response. Ryan, what do you think? If a person had serious issues with shadow work or trauma, what would you say to them?
I would say that embarking on this quest opportunity is a chance to both heal and grow. And it's certainly not going to be easy, but the environment and the silence invites a certain type of potential that you really can't get anywhere else. And the quest can't be worse than anything that's already happened to you.
Yeah. So while we're on this topic, another, like, number 7 for people's biggest fears was kind of in the category of existential dread. And so Lauren said, the basic fear of facing the abyss in the absence of all my creature comforts and city living distractions. So I'm wondering, Ryan, what would you say to someone like Lauren who just is fearing facing the internal abyss?
I think she's hit the nail on the head, and it will be it will be very daunting. The isolation and the silence will be daunting, but how how so powerful it is to overcome that void of outer overstimulation, because there's something that is going to awaken in her that she'll find most pleasing.
Right. Thank you. Spoken by somebody who certainly had that experience out there. Patricia, what was it like for you facing the void out there with no distractions?
Honestly, I quite enjoyed it. I actually quite enjoyed it because it was quiet, and I could hear my train of thoughts, and I could be in nature and enjoy, the bird song and just the mountain, the energy. For me, it wasn't never that was not one of my concerns, and it was actually something that I crave.
Yeah, I get that. Carl Gregor, were you ever daunted or afraid of staring into the abyss when you were out there alone?
Before I left for the quest, yeah, most definitely. But I think it's hard for people to picture what happens, because they think they will face the abyss in the surrounding of their home or so. But this is a totally different experience. You go into what we call a dream state. The food affects you, the nature affects you. You're held by all this magic, and there are so many things up there that takes care of you. So I think that the abyss that you feel at home, it will definitely be there, and it's part of you that has to meet that. But on the other hand, it will not be as bad as you think it will be, because there are so many things up there that will actually hold you. So you will manage. And like Norma Retaskett said, there is nothing like pride. If you really feel stressed or something really happens to you, you can always abort. There is nothing wrong with that. And you've done what you could, and you met what you're supposed to, and that's a beauty. Don't hit yourself because of that. Then that was not supposed to be.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think I would also say, I would add that, like you said, Carl Gregor, there's quite a lot of magic there. And so if you're going to look into the abyss, you're probably not going to do it out in the wilderness, because it is so teeming with life and opening to the other, opening to the natural world, and being in dialogue with other natural beings. I mean, for God's sakes, the bird song alone, and the butterflies, and the foliage, and the vistas. I mean, I've never felt alone in the wilderness. It's certainly not the way I have at home, or in a mall, or in a movie theater, or at a family dinner at the holidays. So whatever sort of existential dread or abyss that I experience in my normal day-to-day life, for some reason, reasons that I consider obvious now that I've done Quest several times, but it just doesn't occur out there, certainly not in the same way. Relationship to self will certainly come up, but I feel nothing but belonging or welcome or being at home. Not that everything in nature wishes you well, but just that there's something very healing about remembering your primal animal self, remembering that actually you came from nature. You haven't come into nature right now. You've come from nature, and you're returning. And so that very first skill of belonging in the natural world is such an important precursor to every other kind of healing you might hope to do. And, whether it's you're scared of being hungry, you're scared of being cold, you're scared of being alone, you're scared of the dark. My teacher Sparrow said, if you're going to really love the earth, you have to learn to love all her faces. And so part of it is, being cold, being in the dark, needing to provide for yourself, for shelter and companionship while you're out there. And so finding pleasure in whittling a piece of wood, or discovering a heart-shaped rock, or listening and observing birds you've never noticed before. All of that is a very healing and connecting experience. So kind of want to throw that out there for people. Now, number 8, there was a cluster of things about acting out or acting in. And Charisse put it really well. Her fear was being really bitchy and mean to other people around me, being mean to you as a facilitator, crying way too much, getting a bad headache, trying to run away, trying to sneak food in, all of these things, right? So just basically having like shadow tantrums and like the worst self show up in public, I guess. So I'm going to throw to Jen, who, I think, Jen, you were really honest about some of the struggles you were having, and some were really obvious, like having wet boots right away on the first day, super sucked. So how did you deal with the aggravation, agitation, and irritation that was coming up for you on the mountain?
Well, I mean, I think that I just had no other choice. But it's it's actually much more beautiful than that. It feels much more loving than that. That was the reality. So that was like the pragmatic part of myself. But to have the opportunity to take care of those needs without like throwing them to somebody else, I had to, and I also loved it. It was a real honor to take care of myself and to know that, like whatever. I think we all have parts of ourselves that are like perhaps just more human than other parts of ourselves, and that more human part can act out. And it sounds like Charisse knows that part of herself, so that is a wonderful place to start. If you know these things and they're not surprising, they're not going to throw you off. You just have to, either prepare, which I I didn't with my boots. So I would recommend just waterproofing them before you go. That would have solved a lot of things. But yeah, just like small things might make you grumpy, and just deal with it. I don't know. Not in an unkind way, but in a way that you know that you're taking care of yourself. Mm-hmm. That's how it felt for me. That's how it felt.
Yeah, for sure. And then also, Patricia, I think you had a concern about maybe being emotional and crying too much in the sort of the 4 days pre-quest and 4 days post-quest. How was it for you to be like emotive in group?
Yeah, that was one of my main concerns, because crying has never been my strong suit, and it's been something that I've been working on the last 2 years, and I think I promised myself that, well, everyone was so supportive. I mean, and so there's never any judgment from the group of any show of emotions. And I also promised myself that because I've committed to doing this, that I would feel all the emotions. I would be open to what comes up, and I would allow myself to feel it. And if I felt anger, or if I felt frustration at anybody, I know that it's from me, it's not from anybody else. And I take responsibility for how I was feeling. And it's obviously something that needs to be looked at if it was coming up.
Right. Thank you. I'm curious for Carl Greger and for Ryan as well. How was that for you? It may have been surprising how much mirroring and sharing and there was in the 4 days pre-solo and the 4 days post. How did you manage any anxiety or uncertainty around being vulnerable, showing emotion? How did that go for you?
There is a magic happening around the circle that you participate in. I mean, I didn't know any of my fellow questers. And you form a group, and you are supported by a circle, and there's always someone there that can hold you, that will understand you. And I felt really safe. That was never a problem, because you are so supported. Everybody have their issues, and we helped and loved each other, and it was really, really obvious. And I think we will stick together for a very long time afterwards, because you form such a tight group, and you are held by a circle, and it will not be a problem. All issues that you have, let them surface, because that's the proper surrounding to let them surface in.
Ryan, community has been something that you haven't had in abundance back home, and I don't know if you expected to do so much sharing and connecting in circle. What was that like for you as a person who is used to spending quite a bit of time alone? What was it like for you to kind of show up and then not be forced, but invited to participate in a group?
I would say that I was pleasantly surprised at the positive effects of the group work that we did, and I was hesitant, and I questioned its relevance beforehand, but all the exercises that we did and the sharing that and the communication that went on, it was mind-blowing. Yeah, it was really mind-blowing, the effect of the communication and the sharing that we experienced. I have a new respect for communication. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. Jen, I'm curious, you've been on 2 retreats with me and now a quest, and you know that I usually have a much more dictatorial style when I'm leading groups, and this is pretty different. There's a very specific process and space that I personally think is required for quest. I'm curious what your experience of the circling was.
Oh, it was so great. Seemed like we always just knew exactly what to say at the right time. And it felt really quickly that we all just kind of dropped into symbol or metaphor or whatever, right? Like we knew what the other person was saying. They were saying words that meant one thing, but they meant another thing, or they meant all the things. And I really adored all the things that everybody shared with me. I appreciate that it was not not crafted, I guess. It was like not directed. So there was a lot more, I think, revelations for one of us.
Nice. Well said. Patricia, you've also been on retreat with me before, and now been on quest. I'm curious, with regard to the circling, with the sessions and even the mirroring, what stood out for you in our sessions?
I think the one thing that really stood out was the I think Jen might have covered this. It's just the openness, how we all just came together and we held space for each other. And you allow us time to process it, to talk about it with no constraint. I mean, and there was acceptance. I think it's just, it's amazing how we all just came together, we connected, and then, we allow each other to speak our minds and express our emotions. I think, for me, it's just having that space to do it, to know that you are held, you are loved, and with no judgment.
Thank you. Yeah, and personally, I believe that the people who come on quest with you, you have some kind of connection with on a soul level. You have some work to do with them, and so the whole thing is set up so that there's plenty of space and time to do whatever work needs to emerge. So there's the we time, there's the me time, there's the meal times together, where we kind of digest and process by sharing food together. What I want to say is that these are 4 people who have varying ways of distancing themselves from people, or holding themselves apart, or shielding their hearts a bit, or being just kind of generally misanthropic like myself, So this is not 4 touchy-feely woo-woo types that all came together who are like, I'm so excited about the sharing time. That's not what this was. Okay. Number 9, in terms of fears, was kind of the cluster of things around logistical concerns. So Leanne says, my prayer with outdoor adventures like this has always been, please, please, please don't let me have my period while I'm doing this, which I did and have a number of times on Quest. We'll talk about that. Megan says, concerns would be things like hygiene, because I'm a contact lens wearer. And Sarah basically had a litany of questions. What can I pack? Sleeping bag, lighter paper for making a fire, tent, bear spray, how long is the trek? Do I filter water or pack it in? Like just, type A planner type. So let's throw to you, Ryan. How did you feel in terms of the pre-quest portion about what, did you feel equipped to make good decisions about what you needed logistically?
Yep, you prepared us really well with lists and the meetings that we had beforehand. And I didn't feel at any time unprepared at any moment. I had everything I needed, and I wore contacts. I was able to take my contacts out when I wanted to, and
it was all good.
I was at home on that mountain.
Awesome. That's great. That's awesome. I didn't even know you wear contacts and were able to handle that. That's great. That's something I can tell people. It's all fine. Patricia, you and I both entered our moon time. I was at base camp in the valley right beside the water. So easy for me. I use a Diva cup. No problems there. However, you were on the mountain. You were away from water. Would you share how you handled your cycle while you were on solo?
I actually brought that up to you about 2 months before Quest, because I knew I was going to get my period during Quest, even though I did pray that I wouldn't get it. But I have to say, you were so great with sending the videos on how to set up a bear bag and how to prep for it using the duct tape and crush out aspirin and Ziploc bags. So I was well prepared for it. I mean, I watched the video a few times. I practiced the knot tying. And I knew my period was coming on day 2. So on day 1, after I set up my tub, I set up the bear bag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is a concern if there's bears around and you've got your moon time and you're not using a cup. If if you are going to be putting tampons or pads or anything like that, keeping them in the garbage, what Patricia's talking about is you would crush some aspirin that sort of masks the scent, and then you would set up a bear bag. And there's a couple of different ways to do it. And actually, it turns out in this terrain, it's a little bit tricky because these are sort of lodgepole pines and they don't have really long branches, but there's there's a few different ways to do it, and there's videos and links and all that kind of stuff that I send to people. So did you feel that it distracted you from your spiritual work at all, Patricia?
Not at all. I actually felt it was another way of cleansing. I think it was
beautiful.
It was great. Another way of cleansing, and it was actually great to get it during Quest too, because I really didn't have to do anything.
Right.
I walked around, I napped.
Yeah.
You
could just rest.
Yes. And I rested. And for me personally, I'm also anemic. So I usually get really tired during my moon time. So it was great to get it during moon time. I rested, I slept.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I've done all kinds of things. I've done all kinds of ritual. I've bled on rocks. I've done all kinds of things because it's I'm getting my period while I'm out in the wilderness. What can I do with this that I wouldn't normally do in my backyard or my garden? So, you can look at that as an opportunity to do a different kind of ceremony or ritual while you're out there. Now, number 10, biggest concern, winding up very quickly here, not wanting to come back. So Sheila said, my fear would be that I wouldn't want to come back. And Tatiana says, this is kind of like a second piece to that. Because Sheila was talking about the quiet and the silence, the solitude. It sounds so peaceful and perfect. And Tatiana, kind of part B to that, says, upon returning, does one feel more or less connected to the space they live in, including their work, their relationships, etc.? So why don't we start with Carl Gregor? How's it going on the return for you?
I felt so lost before I came.
Mm-hmm.
That was for me the challenge, that I didn't find any peace in the job. I felt that nothing was worthwhile. It was just a spiritual practice. That was the only thing that made sense. Everything else was just such a waste of time and energy. And I had really big problems with that.
Mm.
But to come back, I feel much more of an acceptance to things the way they are. You cannot be in paradise 24/7 in the mountains. It doesn't work like that. And I somehow realized it, but going back, I feel more acceptance. Yeah, there are things I don't like still that I have to do, but that's, fact of life. And it's like I left something up in the mountain that was, for me, very helpful for my journey. So I feel more relaxed. It's the way it is. The return for me was much better because the coming there was the hard part.
Okay. Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Patricia, I'm wondering if you've had a different experience.
I do miss the mountains. I miss it, and the return has been hard because I think I also live in a big city. But like you said that you do this, you bring it back for your people, and also like Carl Gregor said, you cannot be in that environment. I mean, I guess some people can, but most of us cannot. We have to come back. We have to live our life, and if to want to be in that environment the whole time is, I think, is looked as, for me anyways, would be a form of escape
Mm.
from what
Mm-hmm.
real life is.
Mm-hmm. I also just want to acknowledge that, Patricia, you grew up in Singapore. You'd never been camping before this. You didn't know how to start a fire before this. And you came back and you were like as though it was no biggie that you had learned how to make fire and you had a beautiful, I've seen pictures of your tarp. It was totally on point. So how does it feel having crossed such a major threshold?
It feels that I've achieved something, that I've left an old piece of myself, that this was something new that I undertook. And I mean, for everybody out there, like Carmen and Ruben were great. Day one, they looked at me and they goes, "We're going to teach you how to make fire." Because you knew I had no experience whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, for me, the logistic of just setting up the tarp wasn't even the main concern for me, to begin with. And it feels really good to know that coming from a big city, being a city girl, that I can do this, that I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I survived the 4 days out there.
Mm-hmm. And did more than that. That's beautiful. Thanks, Patricia. Jen, how's it going for you with the return? You actually live in a place that has quite a lot of natural beauty. You're used to that all the time. But that's still not the same as being in silence and solitude and spending 4 days doing beautiful rituals that you created, ceremonies for yourself. How is your return? Do you feel more or less connected to your life?
Both, probably. Like, I feel more connected to the parts that are new and emergent and important, and less connected to the parts that are no longer relevant. And somehow, some magical way, that even the parts that I don't feel connected to, the all that's filling it is just like gratitude and love. I feel all the things, and I like, there's no way to give it words. Um, I didn't know that this was possible. Yeah, so I feel both. I feel both. And the disconnection doesn't feel like disconnection. It feels more like irrelevance, or it's not a personal thing anymore. It's a really powerful feeling.
Wonderful. Now, so that was number 10, but I got to tell you, there were 2 other ones that only like one person said each one of these things. Sarah said injuring yourself, which is my greatest fear, is that one of you was going to twist your ankle or something. Nobody else said it but Sarah. That's my biggest fear, which is why Ruben and I really have gone to great pains to, choose a very good location. Also equip people, be quite sober and like fret for your safety and like let you know, but also make sure that people are really equipped before they go and spend 4 days alone. So I think injuring yourself is a very good concern to have, and I wish it was much higher in the list. I wish more people were concerned about it. But one person said something. This is Stacy. She said being judged by others if they knew what you were doing. And I think actually probably a lot more people have that fear than actually said it. So Jen, I'm curious, what would you say to Stacy about her fear of being judged by others if they knew that she was going on a quest?
I would tell Stacy that she has a few different options. She can lie, or she can not tell people, or she can tell them and be judged. And likely it's going to be a different response for each person. The world is kind of bullshit a lot of the times when it comes to your spiritual practice. Yeah, that was a kind way to say it. It's not receptive. And sometimes, at best, I feel like a novelty. At worst, I feel like I don't belong. So, yeah, you have a lot of options, and you don't have to tell people. You don't have to tell them why. The world will tell you that you do need to explain yourself, and I just don't buy it. So it's your choice. It's your choice. The world is going to respond, and that's the world's choice too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Patricia, how would you reply to Stacy, who's worried about being judged?
I think in the same line as Jan is that you tell who you want to tell. And I was actually surprised a lot of my patients found out that I went on quest, not because I told them, but my husband did. And we would come out of treatments and they'll say to me, I cannot believe you're going to do this. And I was surprised how supportive they were. And they all wanted to hear my story when I came back. They were all like, so tell me, how was it? How was the fasting? And I would say almost everyone was very supportive and they were intrigued by it. And they all looked at me and said, oh my God, I wish I can do it.
Isn't that true? Yeah, a lot of the judgment is people's own self-doubt being projected onto someone else. Ryan, how would you reply to Stacy, whose fear is about being judged by others who find out that she's gone on quest?
Oh my goodness, I don't even know how to answer that. Well, I think that if she's concerned about being judged for doing something so great, she should probably go and experience this great opportunity so that she can tell her friends about it no matter what. Because after she tells them about it, then they're going to want to do it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty exhilarating thing to be like, oh yeah, well, I'm a badass who just, completed this amazing thing. So suck it. Yeah, that's what I would say, Stacy. Carl Gregor, what would you reply? Did you have a fear of being judged?
Yeah, most definitely. But you will always be judged. Whatever you do, you are always being judged by other people's eyes and by how they perceive you should be. And when you meet your true self and you are true to your own very nature, that feeling is so much stronger. It's nothing to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
You will be true to yourself, and that feeling is powerful. And as Jen, I think, said, you don't need to share your story with everybody. That's not necessary. Keep it for yourself. I mean, if that is a concern, but you are always being judged.
Mm-hmm. So I would like to end just putting it out to the group. So I will start with Patricia. What would you like witnessed about your quest? What would you like people to know about Quest, those people who might be considering it?
I say do it. If you're even thinking about it, your soul is telling you something.
Mm.
Do it. And there's no two other people that better to do it with than Carmen and Ruben. You guys are so well prepared. I mean, you know how I feel about you guys, but you're well prepared, you're well organized. I never feared for my life out there because I knew and I trusted you guys completely.
Mm.
And for people who are considering it, it will change your life. It will change the way you think about yourself because it will make you believe that anything is possible to spend the days out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a powerful transformation that I witnessed in you for sure, Patricia. So thank you for trusting me and my husband, Ruben, because we take it very seriously. And the only thing that makes all the stress worth it is seeing you come in on the return. So thank you. So I'm going to ask Jen, what would you like witnessed? What do you think people should know about Quest?
That you can go in and you can be really confused. It's okay to not know why you're there or what you're doing. Because not that it becomes clear in the way that you really want, but it becomes clear in a way that makes you feel like the next place is possible. Like, yeah, it genuinely shifted something. Patricia speaks my heart. Carmen, there are no better people to hold you if you don't know what the fuck you're doing. It's powerful. And yeah.
Ryan, what would you like witnessed? What would you like people to know about Quest?
I would just say that going on to Quest is it's worth the risk. That there's a payout for the risk that you take, for the courage that you would have in order to make the decision to do something so awesome.
What was the payoff for you? How would you describe it if you could?
It was truly empowering to endure those 4 days and to make the connections that I did within myself. And I'm walking around with the benefits every day now, with a confidence that I don't know if I could have gained without it.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Carl Gregor, what would you like witnessed? What would you like people to know about Quest?
It will be life-changing. It's by far the best gift you could give to yourself. It is, and it will have a profound impact on you and your life moving forward. And I tell you, if more people did quests, we would live in a much different world. I really believe that. And you just need to do it in an environment where you feel safe, and Carmen and Ruben will provide you with that. So if you have the opportunity, don't hesitate. As Patricia said, if you consider it, your soul is speaking to you, and then you should go, and you will never, ever regret it. Never, ever. I guarantee it.
I agree 1,000%. Speaking from my own experiences doing Quest, it definitely changed my life, obviously, now that I'm leading them. And yeah, you speak my mind, Carl Gregor. This is why I'm leading them, because I think if more people did quests, our world would, if nothing else, have a different feel. You know, I would feel a greater sense of belonging if people had the sense of, oh, this is how you witness each other. This is how we should be with each other. This is what it takes to be a member of the natural world and respect it and each other. This is how we find what our gifts are and remember ourselves together. And this is what witnessing each other does. It's a pretty powerful thing. So thanks everyone for trusting me with that. I'm just going to unmute everybody and throw it out there. Is there more? Is there anything else? Do you think anything was missed?
It's not as hard as you think it is. Or it's hard in a different way.
That's right. Day 4, pretty long day, pretty long night that last
The
night.
light is relentless.
The light is relentless. Yeah. Yeah. But not hard in the way you think.
Yeah.
Like these top 10s, that's not the hardest thing. Anybody want to share what actually ended up being the hardest thing for them?
For me, anyways, the hardest was climbing the mountain. But I
Mm.
mean, that's just a physical thing for me.
Mhm.
And you don't have to go as high up as Carl Gregor and I did.
That's right. You don't have to go straight up the mountain.
No,
That's
we
right.
already talk about next time. We'll just go.
Yeah.
veer
Next
right.
time there will not be snow up to your thighs.
No.
So that'll be
No.
easier. Yes, it does. You don't have to make it hard, right?
No, and we just decided to go straight up. Because we thought that would be fun.
That's right.
Also, I would add that for me, anyways, the reasons I thought about why I wanted to go to Quest turned out to not be the reasons
Hmm.
at all. So it came to me in the mountains that there was something else that I needed to look at, and it wasn't what I thought they were going to be.
Isn't that always the way, right? I've had that every time too. It's like, I don't realize why I'm out there until I'm out there. I set this intention. I think I'm so clear about what I'm trying to discover or find out. And then I get out there and I'm like, oh shit, this is what actually is coming up. Anyone else find that?
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Okay, well, thanks everyone. You are beasts and angels. You are forces of nature. You are elemental influences in my life now. And yeah, I've got the memories to prove it. You're amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Only that.
Only love.
Only love. Love you guys.
Aw, they're so sweet. I am here with none other than Ruben Anderson, the co-producer, I would say, of the Wilderness Quests. Thanks for being back on the show, Ruben. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I think I'm a little rattled, actually, because you just called me co-producer, which is clearly ridiculous. I think I'm more like the concierge of the Wilderness Quest.
Yeah, you do wash a lot of dishes.
Yeah, I wash a lot of dishes, but it's also I'm like the problem solver.
That's right.
And I deal with stuff that's getting in your way and getting in the quester's way.
That's right. You create the context in which the magic can happen. And you also put on a really great knot tying and fire building demo. It's like the Ruben Anderson show. It was great.
I could not wait to do the knot tying demo.
I know. It was so evident that I didn't even try to lead that portion, and I quite enjoyed it. I think the other questers did too. You were very entertaining and informative. So, Ruben.
I trust, given the excellent feedback, that the knot tying demonstration will be moved up in the program.
So that people can practice more.
That's right. There can be
I know
more.
you were concerned about that. And actually, you did suggest that there should be a test or that they needed to demonstrate
That's right.
competence. And I'm not going there.
I think they
That's
should.
not what this is.
They should have to demonstrate knot and fire building ability before they're released in the field.
This is not survival school. If people want to make it that, they can come to you for sure. Ruben, what would you like to have witnessed? What do you think people need to know about Quest if they're considering one?
Well, so my thing is sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've spent a lot of time learning about the environment and the economy and behavior and
Thinking about the future
thinking about the future a great deal. And some of my conclusions might be called pessimistic.
or realistic. Depends on the crowd.
Yeah, it depends on the crowd very much. For me, the spiritual practice that I see you and the questers engaging in, I think is something more like what humans will have in the future. So I think a lot about patterns of life, and I wonder about the patterns of life that we can have now that will be useful for humans in 100 or 200 or 300 years. So not necessarily what our kids will need, but what our great-great-grandkids will need. What are the things that we can pass down to them? I think gardening is a great one. But I also think that a nature-based spirituality or a spirituality conducted in the presence of nature is going to be critical.
So it almost sounds like you're saying, you know, what some of our teachers have said about becoming an ancestor worth claiming, as Jenkinson would put it, or, you know, something about embodied practice, you know, that has that teaches us how to connect to place, how to, you know, thrive where we're planted, or, you know, how to see a god in a dead fly or a spring coming from the mountain, how to be engaged and open to the other and have a less anthropocentric, human-centered spirituality, and one that's a little bit more integrated, so that we, as Mary Oliver would say, remember our place in the family of things.
So rather than rambling on with my esoteric thoughts on this, we can save that for the post-dinner quest conversation.
That's right.
And we should do a shout-out right now.
Yes, we should. And this time we are going to do, in honor of Carl Gregor, who traveled all the way from Stockholm for this quest, let's say hello to all our listeners in Sweden.
Hello, Sweden.
Specifically, let's say hello to Agneta, who was my first ever Stone Pal buddy. Yeah, with me at the very beginning of my quest journey.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, very lovely.
We'd love to come see you again, Sweden.
Absolutely. So, the next quest dates in 2017 are for late August, and the registration is going to close at the end of June. So if people are interested, there's only 8 spots maximum. So if you're interested in coming on quest, if you want to have a conversation with me about it first, just go to carmenspaniola.com and look on the Wilderness Quest page. You'll see that there's a way to contact me there. The next quest in 2018 is in July. So we're going to do one a year now. That's right. Okay. That's about what we can handle.
Did you mention like the cute little log cabins and all that?
I didn't. Yeah, there's really cute little log cabins with your own little wood stove if you want a private cabin. Pretty sweet.
And it's this whole big log lodge.
Yeah.
It's an amazing...
There's 3 border collies, plus we bring ours. There's cats, but we can keep the cats outside if you're allergic. It's really phenomenal in the southern Caribou, kind of just bordering the Chilcotin Range. It's fantastic. So again, August in 2017, July in 2018. If you'd like to learn more, just go to my website, carmenspaniola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.
Bye-bye.